Students, please. What's going to happen here in a moment or two is the students will be reading certain quotes from Elie Wiesel. What I'd like to remind us is it's been said many ways, many times by many different people. Those who don't remember the past are doomed to repeat it. It's not so much remembering the past. Those who don't study the past are doomed to repeat it. Let me say it one time better. Those who don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. We live in very historical times. The threat to our democracy is real. When we think of Pittsburgh, shooting in San Diego, Charlottesville, black churches in New Orleans, South Carolina, the threat that is perceived of immigrants. We live in a time where the other has become challenged, threatened. We have to remember the lessons of the Holocaust so that they don't happen again. We've chosen 6 quotes to represent the 6 million that perished during World War II, the hands of the Nazi Germany. Right. I'd ask the students to read a quote, but I'd also ask them to pause for a moment or two after each quote, because I want you to listen to the words, I want you to ponder, I want you to think about what was being said by Elie Wiesel, the Nobel laureate, author of 57 books, author of the famous book Night. And so without further ado, we'll begin this presentation. I'm hoping that it will make you think and hopefully act upon these thoughts.
I decided to devote my life to telling the story because I felt that having survived, I owe something to the dead. And anyone who does not remember betrays them again.
No human race is superior. The religious state is inferior. All collective judgments are wrong. Only racists make them.
For me, every hour is grace, and I feel gratitude in my heart each time I can meet someone and look at his or her smile.
There may be times when we are powerless to prevent injustice, but there must never be a time when we fail to protest.
Without memory, there is no culture. Without memory, there will be no civilization, no society, no future.
We must take sides. Neutrality helps the opposer, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented.
No, and the last person is going to read the English translation of the Israeli national anthem. The quotes of Elie Wiesel were intended to make you think about what happened during that most difficult time in history. But the idea is we end with hope. In fact, the name of their Star-Spangled Banner is called Hatikva, which means in Hebrew, the hope. So the idea is from this terrible tragedy, from the ashes of the Holocaust, was born a nation, a refuge, a safe haven for the people who had no hope. And so we leave you with the English translation of the Israeli national anthem, as we stand in the shadow of Israel Independence Day. Noah?
So long as within the inmost heart a Jewish spirit sings, so long as the eye looks eastward, gazing apart toward Zion, our hope is not lost. The hope of 2,000 years, to be a free people in our land, the land of Zion and the land of Jerusalem.
Thank you so much for listening and thinking about the topic.
We'll take We just have you stay put, we're just having the council vote on the day.
Sorry.
Supervisor Jack and the students from the Temple Emmanuel Jewish School for coming and presenting on such an important topic on such an important day. And as tomorrow night, we actually begin celebrating Israel Independence Day. It's nice to be here and have heard the beautiful translation of the Hatikvah. President Aramo?
Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the council of the city of Long Beach on Tuesday, May 7th, 2019 at 7 p.m. On a roll call, Councilmember Bendel.
President.
Councilmember Mandel.
President.
Councilmember Moore. Vice President Diamond.
Here.
President Aramo. Let the record indicate the presence of acting city manager Robert Agostisi and Assistant Corporation Counsel Richard Darius. We'll now salute to the flag.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Congratulations. All right, here we go. Thank you, David. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Rabbi Jack, and all the children for coming and making us think about what's actually important in this world. So with that, we'll start with the city manager's update. Sure.
Thank you, President Ramos. Thank you to everyone who came out to Kennedy Plaza on Sunday, April 28th, for the third annual Long Beach Earth Day celebration. We'd also like to extend a special thank you to Tom Huffman for organizing such a successful event. In light of recent events and in accordance with community policing principles, the Long Beach Police Department has partnered with religious institutions of all faiths within the city to provide additional protection against the kind of threats which have become prevalent around the country as of late. As part of this initiative, the department has been working with these houses of worship to create a database of all upcoming holidays and list of emergency contacts. These measures, incorporating routine yet irregularly timed patrols of religious institutions, will allow the LGPD to provide a visible deterrent to would-be sounds, better calculate periods of higher risk where additional resources may be needed, and reassure worshipers of all faiths that they are welcome and protected in our city by the city. Additionally, the Long Beach Police Department has partnered with local houses of worship to conduct active shooter training, which are tactics and strategies to help organizations improve survivability in the event of a shooting. As a reminder, Public Works crews will be flushing hydrants through Thursday, May 16th, between the hours of 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. Hydrants flush to remove iron deposits and sediment from the system. It also lets us know that hydrants are working properly. During this time, you may experience some low pressure or water discoloration, especially when flushing takes place in your neighborhood. When hydrants are open to flush the system, iron deposits can be removed by the high volume of water flowing through the pipes, resulting in the temporary and harmless discoloration of the water. The discoloration is from iron, which is naturally present in water. Those deposits along the inside of our water pipes. We suggest you keep a picture of clear water in your refrigerator, refrain from doing laundry between 9 p.m. and 9 a.m. Once the hydrant flushing is complete, the water color will return to normal. City of Long Beach 2019 beach passes are also on sale 7 days a week at the Gazebo Building located across from the Long Beach Ice Rink. The hours of operation are Monday through Friday, 9 to 6 p.m. and weekends from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. until June 22nd. With the first phase of the Army Corps project done, all of our beaches will be completely open this summer. We're looking forward to a wonderful season. Visit longbeachny.gov/beach for more information. And finally, congratulations to Long Beach's own Tariq Cole on being signed by the Arizona Cardinals in the NFL. We'd also like to congratulate Charlie McAvoy, the Boston Bruins, for moving on to the NHL Eastern Conference Final with the Islanders and Rangers eliminated. We're rooting for Charlie to bring the Stanley Cup home to Long Beach this summer. All right, thank you for that. We'll call the first hearing.
Okay, the first item this evening is a public hearing for the purpose of giving citizens an adequate opportunity to publicly present their views on the general summary of the proposed budget for the year July 1st, 2019 to June 30th, 2020. Just only got this much room on
Apparently, we're gonna get, unfortunately. Can everybody hear me okay? Where's the mic? Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to welcome everybody to our 2019-2020 budget presentation. My name is Rob Agostisi, the acting city manager and spare time for Corporation Council. We're going to be hearing two presentations tonight. One I'll be giving, which consists of a general overview of the city's budget this year, proposed budget, as well as a general overview of the city's finances. The second presentation you're going to hear tonight is from our new financial planner, CNA, and the topic of their presentation will be long-term financial planning. So I know this is a bit difficult to say. I apologize for the glare. I'm going to go back to the first slide. Whatever that was. Thank you. As you can see, the slogan for this year's budget is the foundation for resurgence. Those are not a random grouping of words. They were chosen with care. They were chosen with purpose. And get back to that more in a moment. First, I'm going to dive right into this budget category. This year's budget contains a 7.9% tax increase for residents. You're going to hear me repeat that number often. I'm not going to gloss over that number. I'm not going to sugarcoat that number. There's not going to be any dissembling on my part, and I will not do anything to portray it for anything other than what it is, which is a significant ask of taxpayers. However, it's an ask that's absolutely essential in order to preserve the financial and operational stability of this place. That's what it's for, and to lay the groundwork for future growth. At this point, the city's financial difficulties are pretty much a matter of record, right? In my first week or two in office, our credit rating agency, Moody's, downgraded our credit rating to Baa2 status, which is 2 notches above junk status. In addition, about a month later, the New York State Comptroller assigned us a fiscal stress score of significant. That's the second year in a row we've received that designation, and we're one of only 2 municipalities in New York State to do so. Additionally, there is a restructuring evaluation currently underway by a third state agency. So when we talk about the foundation for resurgence, what we're really attempting to do here is express 2 separate but related principles. First, it's a candid assessment of where we are right now. We acknowledge that. But also, in a larger sense, it's a statement, if you will, on where we want to go and where this budget will allow us to go. So 2 things, location and destination. The proposed tax increase is 7.9% this year, which is slightly lower than last year's adopted tax increase of 8.3%. Now, while many people are automatically inclined to sort of assume the worst when they hear a number like 7.9, it's also very important to keep it in perspective because the city accounts for approximately 35% of residents' tax bills, with the school district and with the county making up the remainder. Therefore, in real dollars, the 7.9% tax increase equates to about a $300 increase for the average long-beach household. Is that considerable? Yes. Hopefully, it's not insurmountable, particularly with the housing market being what it is in the city of Long Beach. I mean, what you have to understand really, though, is this. The city remains engaged in what amounts to a protracted course correction. That course correction extends to before Sandy. For those who may recall, at the end of 2011, the city was borrowing to make payroll. That is not the sign of a healthy organization. To the contrary, that is a sign of an organization that is in dire financial straits. So as the city is grappling with that problem, back in 2012, what happens in October, but Sandy can explain, Paul, completely decimates the city and submerges it, right? So many residents at that time were forced to discard all of their household and worldly possessions accumulated over the span of their lives, right? And those were the fortunate ones, right? Many of the less fortunate among us had to move out of our homes altogether for a period of months, and in some cases years, until they were able to reconstruct. It's easy to forget that now. But the city in the years after Sandy made a very deliberate policy determination. And that determination was as follows. In the years after Sandy, the city suppressed tax hikes to every extent possible. And it did that in order to allow people to rebuild. Practically speaking, it's very difficult to impose tax increases on people who aren't even occupying their homes. And at that time, what you have to also understand is that the city had very legitimate concerns about the viability of its housing market and its tax base. In other words, we didn't know if people were going to come back at that time. Therefore, state and federal relief funding was used for a number of years to plug the hole left by the revenue loss. So from both an economic and from a human standpoint, I mean, I have to say I wasn't a policymaker at the time, but if I was, I can't necessarily say, in fact, I wouldn't say that I would do anything differently. What I might have done a bit differently in the immediate aftermath, after the storm passed was, and this is not a critique, understand, so I probably would have tried to spread out the tax increases over a larger span of time. Once the end of the relief funding became visible. So that's to say, probably in about 2016 or so, I would have tried to phase in some of these tax increases because it's just a bit more palatable and a little bit less jarring for taxpayers. Make no mistake, however, a structural imbalance is a structural imbalance. We would have been in the same spot anyway. That is a fact, no matter which way you slice it. So as far as my introductory comments go, the upshot is really this. Sharp tax increases would have been completely unbearable after Sandy. But with Long Beach's housing market being what it is and resiliency measures that you see popping up all over the city, now is the time to course correct. Slide. Back. Good. Yes, that's it. Hopefully this thing's in order. Anyway, so starting out, as you can see here, sound foundations. The well-being and viability of our city requires sustainable fiscal, environmental, and quality of life conditions. This budget's framework aims to ensure sound foundations are built that complement each other, with the goal of bringing Long Beach to reach its full potential as the shining city by the city. So by the numbers, just briefly, the proposed operating budget this year is $97.6 million, $85 million of which consists of the general fund, 6.4 is the sewer fund, 5.5 million of which consists of the water fund. And just to echo some of the remarks I made earlier, for every dollar collected in the city, 65% of those total taxes go to the school and to the county. The remaining 31% is what goes to the city. So the 7.9% proposed residential tax increase equates to a $304.63 per year, or $25.39 per month average for the average Long Beach home. Slide. All right, this is the first slide that I really want to hone in on and focus in on. It involves what we're calling realistic budgeting. The 2019-2020 proposed budget responsibly right-sizes revenue and expense estimates, laying a sound foundation for restoring the city's finances and financial credibility. As in years past, increases in fixed expenditures have easily outpaced revenue increases. The proposed 7.9% residential tax increase only partially covers this year's budgetary shortfall. Other cost-saving measures were taken to reduce spending. And here's what we need to focus on. So if you look at this first number here, 0.62%, what is that? That's our debt service. Our debt service increase this year is about $251,000, or that's a 0.62% tax increase in and of itself, just by itself. Then layer into that our increase in healthcare costs. Right? They're going up about $586,000, or that's a 1.4% 4 or 5% tax increase by itself. Now, layer into that the cost of contractual raises under collective bargaining agreements. Right, that's another $1,043,000, which is a 2.5% tax increase by itself. When those numbers are added together, you get a 4.65% increase in taxes just through fixed costs. That leaves the city 3.3% for everything else. These are fixed costs, they are sunk costs. So what we're really looking at here in terms of maneuverability is 3.3%. Slide. So what are we doing with that 3.3? These are just some illustrative examples. We'll be hearing a lot more from our financial consultant and our accounting consultant as the night progresses. But these are just illustrative examples of the things we're trying to do to responsibly right-size city revenues and expenses based on historical trend. That is the theme of this year's budget, adhering to historical trends. So for departmental income, we reduced that by $208,000 to reflect unrealized budgeted revenues, primarily attributable to the police department, the Ring of Steel. In past years, for as long as we've had this Ring of Steel, which is the device that takes pictures of the license plate as you enter town, we budgeted about $500,000 in revenue. We're cutting that dramatically this year. We're not eliminating it, and in the next meeting, we'll have Commissioner Taggart back to explain the plan for generating the revenue that we have considered in the budget. But for now, that is a prime example of the type of thing where we are trying to hew the trends and put forward to the public what amounts to a reasonable, moderate budget. Also, licenses and permit revenue. We're reducing that by $215,000 to reflect a reduction in building permit fees previously generated by Super Substandard. Again, there's nothing we can do about this. We just have to be realistic about it and account for it properly. The same goes for the reduction in state and federal aid that's being reduced by $441,000 this year, and there's very little that we can do about that. Again, we are just simply trying to put forward an honest budget that reflects actual trends. Overtime, that's a little different situation. We're actually increasing the overtime by $140,000 this year, which is, of course, not subject to criticism, and everybody understands that. But historically, what's happened is we haven't accounted properly for this expense every year. We have increased it by $140,000 this year to reflect the actual trends. However, it's also important to understand what we're doing on the other end, which is implementing managerial oversight and control to ensure that the people who work overtime aren't doing so simply to augment or complement their existing salary. In other words, we want people working overtime when the actual need for overtime exists. And those are the policies that we're trying to implement this year. I think that, luckily from my standpoint, having been with the city as long as I've been, and given my background, I think I'm ideally situated to help in that regard, and I'm looking forward to tackling this challenge. Next slide. A few things to say about this one. So this is when we get into the topic of long-term financial planning. I don't want to step on CNA's toes. This is the subject of their presentation, but there are a few important things that I'd like to run through on this slide. First of all, you can see the first point there is restoring financial credibility. That's a term I've used often in the last couple of months. We're working with partners to restore finances and financial credibility, the New York State Comptroller, the Financial Restructuring Board, the CMA, and our internal auditors, ABC. The important thing to realize about restoring financial credibility is this. The city has been almost locked in this cycle, this feedback loop, where every few years, probably about 6 to 7 years, some massive adjustment needs to be made en masse to address a structural imbalance that has ballooned and reached a critical mass. And when that happens, historically, what you're seeing are very, very large tax increases because the numbers catch up to us. So if you go back to 2012, your residential tax increase that year was about 16%. 6 or 7 years, 8 years before that, and I'm sure many in the audience remember this, there was a 25% tax increase at one point. This is a cycle, and this is what diminishes our financial credibility as we move forward. It hurts our ratings, and ultimately, it's going to hurt our ability to enter in strategic partnerships and to go into business. Something has to be done. the site has to be broken eventually. And the question is, of course, how do you accomplish that? Well, you start with the little things, right? And you make sure that those things go correctly. And then you start to work on the big ticket items. This year, my first priority was to make sure that our audited financials were submitted to the Federal Clearinghouse on time and with less findings. That was something that was accomplished, all right? And we're very proud of that accomplishment. It's something, frankly, that we should be working on regularly for it every year, but we haven't. And if you want to restore your financial credibility with markets and business partners, this is how you start. Granted, it's training, but it is a prerequisite for a financial turnaround. It has to happen. Another thing that, I would want the public to understand is this. When you're dealing with ABC, that's our internal auditor, they've been here twice in the last 6 months conducting audits. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever gone through an audit, but it's generally a very unpleasant experience. It is resource driven, all right? You're unable to focus on all the other operational tasks at hand that you're here to work on. That's why we all take these jobs, is to work on that stuff, not to work on audit responses. They've been here twice in the last 6 months. The New York State Comptroller has been here for approximately a year now. They are in the midst of their second audit, and in fact, they're conducting a third review right now on this very budget. So that's 3, just from the New York State Comptroller. And then you layer in the Financial Restructuring Board. We expect their analysis to hopefully be complete in about a month or 2, although we can't say for sure. However, we have engaged in an information exchange with them for the better part of a year. So at any given moment, we have to drop everything in this building and put out a financial file. And I just want to compliment the staff for the way they've managed to handle that responsibility over the last several months. It's been intense. And it's important for the public to understand that that is an essential first step to restore our financial credibility. The next point is a topic near and dear to my heart, that is recurring revenue streams. We're working to maximize existing revenue streams and identify additional revenues, primarily through smart grid initiatives, but through others as well. If I could just say something on this topic, when you talk about municipal finance, it's not this mystical thing. It's not this esoteric thing that no one's capable of understanding, right? If you want to balance your books in the public sector, there are 3 main ways that you do. All right, 2 are on the revenue side, 1 is on the expense side. The 2 on the revenue side, the 2 main ones anyway, are raising taxes and expanding your tax base. I'll talk about the cost side in a minute, but in terms of the revenue side, there are many ways to expand your revenue, and we've done a lot this year to locate creative sources of revenue, such as the mortgage and default registry, and we're now talking about whether you like it or not. There's different ways to view parking meters. We're not totally sold on that concept, but we're exploring it. The concept of a way station on Long Beach Boulevard has popped up again. But the thing to realize that these are all small-scale initiatives. If you really want to tackle this thing in big chunks that allow services to continue in the city uninterrupted, I submit the answer is staring us all in the face. It's this housing market. We have an amazingly robust market. It's the hottest real estate market maybe on the land. I mean, all of you can see what you see. A converted bungalow from goes for on the West End. It's just amazing. And the thing is, developers want to be here. What we need to do with these developers, and this takes a while, don't get me wrong, that's the downside of a recurring revenue stream to increase the tax base, is you plant a seed, it takes a long time for that seed sometimes to germinate. But what we have to do differently is we have to learn from what happened on the super block. That is a prime example of what not to do. Developers come in here, and instead of starting at the grassroots level with the community, they're starting somewhere else, and they're playing a game of positional argument, right? They're starting high and ending hopefully somewhere in the middle. But that is not the recipe to success in this city anyway. That's not the way it goes. I like to think of the example of the Hebrew Academy property, right? They're in an environmental review right now, but frankly, I've seen their plans. And had they just simply started where they are right now, there's a very substantial likelihood that would be built already. And if that's there, you're talking about adding conservatively $800,000 to our tax base, maybe as high as $1 million by some estimates. That makes a huge difference on our budget in terms of sustenance of existing services. So these are the things that we have to start thinking about. Smart growth initiatives, there are ways to do this without talking about monstrous structures that are going to consume everyone and, deal with more traffic, more parking issues. There's changes in demographics that are really like for a community like this, where you have cool, walkable downtowns, walkable train stations. This is what people want, right? 45 minutes from Manhattan, a beach. What beats this? It's a gem. And we have to start thinking about ways to encourage development here, but also without killing the developer in the process, or having the developer kill us, or wind up in litigation with us. So that's the goal. You're going to see me start working on that immediately after the budget. But again, the downside associated with expanding your tax base is it can take a while. So what do you do in the meantime? Well, that leads me into the third point here, which is reevaluating cost structure and service delivery model, working to identify savings opportunities and implement controls to keep costs manageable. The most common question I've gotten on this budget so far is, Rob, that sounds great. What are you doing to tighten your belt? What are you doing? I get it. I understand this question. For the past dozen or so years that I've been employed by the city, I've worked on the cost side of the equation. All right, I've worked on the labor side. And what I can tell you is this. When you're talking about a workforce, 99% of which is union, all right, there are a lot of constraints. You're dealing with things in the payroll law, mainly, things like the Triborough Amendment, interest arbitration, and even obscure doctrines such as past practice, which we explored a little bit at the last council meeting. But that is static. So when you have an existing collective bargaining agreement, your maneuverability goes down tremendously. That is just the reality of the situation. So that being said, what is the one tool that remains left in the public employer's toolbox? It's layoffs. That's your only bargaining leverage. However, there are no layoffs included in this budget. I did not include that for a reason. Because I'm not prepared without the financial restructuring board, our experts, coming back to us and guiding us through this analysis. I'm not prepared to fire indiscriminately into the workforce and guess as to what we should be cutting. That's why the financial restructuring board, that's why they exist, and that's what they're doing to help us right now. And even when they come back, who's to say what will happen? I can't guarantee anything though. But I can tell you this, there's a compounding effect that exists with the financial restructuring board. And that exists because they're not only going to try and isolate discrete areas where you can cut, but they're going to try and provide incentives to do so. That's the compounding effect, not just elimination, but providing additional funds to help that process along. So it would be crazy from a financial standpoint alone, in my opinion, to start making cuts when we don't have the guidance needed to do so. That will happen eventually. But when, just off topic for a second, when the UPRB finally does come back with its report, we also intend to have CMA do a more drill down and detailed analysis. So it's going to be sort of multi-phased and sort of two different prongs. It's called a two-pronged approach to evaluating our workforce. The first is going to be by the financial restructuring board, and the second prong will be by CMA. So I talked about the financial reasons for not doing it at this time. But also, we have to think about it from a human perspective as well. I'm not sure how many people in the audience have ever participated in a reduction in force analysis, or in reality, I have. Rest assured that layoffs are the most unpleasant thing that any public employer could ever have to go through. You're telling an employee who has done absolutely nothing wrong that they can't work here anymore. All right, so from a human perspective, that is a crushing blow to an individual. It rips apart families, and it rips apart the community, frankly. I'm not saying it may not have to happen at some point in the future, but the least an employee deserves is a look in the eye when they're being told, why they would have to possibly be cut. And from a managerial standpoint, I would want to know why and how and where before, like I said, anybody cuts here indiscriminately. And that's my 2 cents on layoffs and why they're not included in this budget. But that does segue into my final point, which involves setting performance benchmarks and utilizing data. When the FRB comes back with their report, when CNA comes back with their revenue analyses, and with the workforce analysis, it's important to understand this. You know, in this town, as we are all aware, there are very strong currents that run with respect to special interests. That hasn't always been the case in the city of Long Beach. I'm sure that will always be the case. But at some point in time, we need to allow data, empirical analysis, quantitative data to drive our policy determinations, right? Because you're seeing it again. These numbers, they catch up with you. They are like a ruthless predator. They're going to find you eventually. And when that happens, the bubble bursts, and there's another large tax increase. That's the cycle we're trying to break. And we're not going to break that cycle unless we can start to pay attention to these numbers and actually do something when we receive it, right? That is the key. Let the numbers, let the data drive the policy. Slide. The next two slides are really meant to just convey a couple of basic things. They're not budget specific, but they are in a sense because they deal with operation. And the finances and the operations of the city, they are not separate and distinct, they're not mutually exclusive. They're one and the same, finances and operations. But when we are constantly putting out financial flyers in the city, I've been doing that every day since I got into office. That is my daily regimen, is put out the financial flyer of the day. But that has an opportunity cost. And the cost is everything operationally that we need to be doing and that we should be doing. This first slide relates more to the need. So the things that we're looking to do over the coming year, if we just stabilize this environment financially, are accelerating road repaving and reconstruction. Everybody knows what that's all about. We replace the sewer main at the same time we pave roads and we do the streetscaping. And it turns out beautiful. And it's fully functional. That is the proper way to do it. We just want to expedite the process. Army Corps Protection Project, that's almost complete. Sewer consolidation. Let me say this about the sewer consolidation. That has suddenly taken on a life of its own. You are all about to hear a lot more about sewer consolidation in the next month or two. It's no longer some abstraction. It is heating up substantially, and I don't want to belabor that point because, like I said, there's going to be much more discussion on that topic, but stay tuned. Also stay tuned in the next 2 or 3 months for the critical infrastructure bulkhead out of Reynolds Channel. I'm happy to announce that last week we closed on the deal with the town of Hempstead to purchase the underwater property needed to construct the bulkhead, which will run tennis bubble to the wastewater treatment facility. We have a few things, a few big ticket items left with respect to the bulkhead, the critical infrastructure bulkhead, including an agreement with the Long Island Railroad to figure out a way to use a deployable barrier, probably 80% of the way through that agreement. Once that's complete, what you'll see next is you'll see us put it out there, and you will see it come up for financing as well, even though it's been fully reimbursed by FEMA funds, 100% cost share. So that's the good news with respect to that. And right now we do anticipate financing it through a series of bond anticipation notes. And that's why it's so important to maintain our finances rather than our structural stability. Because that does happen, and those interest rates are real, $20 million, and it could be substantial. So, but also, of course, we never stop our efforts to protect the water aquifer. Saltwater intrusion is unacceptable at any level, and we have always moved forward vigorously and zealously to protect that aquifer as our sole source of water. Slide. Now this delves into more of the area of the wants. These are things that we want to focus on more. Once we have the core foundation and structural financial stability that this budget will afford. Near and dear to any corporation council's heart is the draft comprehensive plan. This is inextricably tied to the revenue expansion that I discussed earlier in this presentation. Recreation, supporting and promoting Long Beach cultural, recreational, and artistic programs and initiatives. Reestablish boards, increasing community and staff engagement by reestablishing dormant boards and commissions. Brief point on this one. We do anticipate reestablishing the ethics board within the next month or two. That's a very narrow mandate, though. I'm more excited about what we're starting to discuss in terms of forming either quality of life committee, and we've reached out to several constituent groups about this already. Having it be an umbrella organization or committee rather, that has subcommittees, or perhaps reinvigorating public safety committee, rolling into there. But one of the things I'm trying to accomplish is instead of having all these separate items around town, telling us they're very important quality of life concerns, I'd rather roll this into an umbrella group so they can help the city prioritize them. Because right now, I can tell you, we're getting information coming in from all over the city, and you need your head on a swivel to keep up with it. And it becomes a problem in terms of prioritizing it. So why not allow that, the prioritization is, to rise up from the grassroots level? And I think we can start to do that through a quality of life committee. Code enforcement, increasing emphasis on code enforcement as it pertains to quality of life issues. Well, this is not some type of abstraction. This is something that I've been working on very diligently over the course of the last 7 months. All of our mail-in fines for VCOs or violations of our code of ordinances, the mail-in fines have increased by a minimum of 50%. One of them increased by 150%. There are several new ones. All of these relate to quality of life concerns. I'll run through this very quickly in the CMA's notification. But when we talk about possession and use in Ocean Beach Park, consumption in public places, smoking, vaping in public parks, that's new. Bathing, no lifeguard on duty, new. On beach after hours, no beach pass, illegal entry, bicycle outside center, roller skates, skateboard, boardwalk, glass on beach, dog at large, nuisances by dog, dog on boardwalk beach, no dog license, use of public sewers, urination, that's the one that went up 150%, by the way. Improper disposal, refuse, litter, noise, first offense only, and bicycle on sidewalk rent. You know, these are the types of concerns that I routinely hear about from the citizens, you know, and we are listening. I think I was probably uniquely situated in my position as corporation counsel to help negotiate the increase in these fines, which ultimately remain at the judge's discretion, but we seem to have a consensus on what these mail-in fines would be. So we don't know what it's going to be in terms of revenue generation, and that's not the main reason why we did it. If it helps, great. If not, we're really devoted to quality of life concerns. That's the reason we did it. Beautification, partnering with the businesses, community to enhance downtown experience, ADA language and access, improving upon ADA, language access policies. That also includes a new website, which is nearly ready to roll. Beach Park, improving upon our world-class boardwalk and Ocean Beach Park, and the Long Beach Response App, overseeing resident requests in the Long Beach Response App to ensure timely employee responses. You can see that with our new initiatives with potholes, what we call pothole patrol. Is that it? Works like a charm. They work out great. Slide. And looking ahead, while much has been accomplished in the past 6 years since the storm ravaged our community, we still have much left to achieve. The rebuilding continues both fiscally and visibly. Our team is dedicated to working tirelessly for taxpayers of the city of Long Beach. Again, to circle back to the initial theme of this presentation, what this budget is meant to do is build the foundation. The House portion of it, which I'm sure everybody is interested in, comes in 2 weeks from now when you hear the capital plan presentation. That is not possible. All of those initiatives are not possible unless they are built on unless they exist on solid financial footing. That is what the foundation of research is all about. I thank you all very much for your time and indulgence, and I'd now like to welcome up CMA.
Very good. Good evening. My name is Richard Tortora. I'm the president of Capital Markets Advisors. Can the folks in the back hear me okay? I'll take that to be okay. Thank you for having us come in today. Thank you. Okay. So CMA, Capital Markets Advisors, is an independent registered municipal advisor. That means we're registered with both the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission and the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board. We're headquartered here on Long Island in Nassau County, in Great Neck, staff of 22. We represent presently about 400 public jurisdictions across New York State, and we do this from 2 different perspectives. Our primary business is the independent registered municipal advisory business, in which we assist jurisdictions, including the city of Long Beach, the city of Glen Cove, Poughkeepsie, Rochester, Buffalo, Syracuse, Yonkers, White Plains, etc. Most of the largest cities and quite a few of the mid-range and smaller cities we represent. when they need to go into the market to access the capital markets to fund capital projects and cash flow needs. Another part of our business is to work with public jurisdictions on long-range capital planning, long-range strategic planning. Thank you. Okay. To the extent this is important to anyone, Thomson Reuters, financial services firm Thomson Reuters, traditionally ranks us, or perennially ranks us among the top 10 financial advisors in the nation, both in terms of the number of financings we advise on and the par amount of financings. The reason that's important to you is that means that our staff of 22 professionals, who collectively have about 450 years of experience working with local governments, has seen a lot of things during the course of our collective experience. So we bring to the table a lot of expertise and skills and experiences that we think the city can certainly benefit from. Good. The organizational chart for this engagement, while I'm the president of the firm, my primary responsibility is to attend meetings like this, public information sessions, and make sure you have access to all of the resources of the firm. Some of my colleagues are here this evening. Margaret Guarino is a managing director with our firm. Margaret has been in public finance for over 40 years. She started working as a staff assistant with New York City Mayor Ed Koch. She ran some city agencies for the mayor. She was a banker at Merrill Lynch, Bank of America, and has a wealth of expertise working with jurisdictions. And I guess I have to use the word with challenged or troubled jurisdictions. Among others that she's working with lately are the town of Islip on Long Island. We have an upcoming engagement with Brookhaven. We work with Poughkeepsie on Long Island, Riverhead, Garden City. So both very strong credits and some credits that are more challenged. So Margaret will lead the team for this engagement. James Nyko, who's also with us this evening, is a vice president with the firm. James has a myriad of skills, one of which is identifying funding opportunities, grant funding opportunities to fund the kind of work that we'll be doing with the city of Long Beach. So certainly, as part of the engagement, we'll be looking for opportunities to provide funding for the services that we're providing. Other folks who are not presently with us, Janet Morley is a vice president with 25 years experience working on credits, in particular troubled credits. One of Janet's claims to fame, prior to joining our firm, she worked for Warren Buffett. She was one of 5 people picked by Mr. Buffett to start up his municipal bond insurance company, which he started right after the fiscal collapse, or near collapse in 2007. So Janet is really a credit expert. Tom Bousakis and Evan Tortora will also be providing support services. So what I'd like to do is pass the mic to Margaret and have her take you through the scope of services that her team will provide to the city. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to run through generally what our assignment is. It's in 3 stages, and then I'll hand it over to James to talk about fiscal conditions, and then I will come back to talk about the long-term plan. So this is going to take 3 phases. The first one is fiscal conditions. We need to understand and have a very deep understanding of just how you all got here and where you are today. Once we have that understanding and a basis for our analysis, then we can go through what we call a multi-year plan. The multi-year plan will be a 5-year forward look at where we will be. You heard Rob talk about you'll go through a number of years and all of a sudden you have a huge tax increase. Well, if you don't look 5 years ahead and look at what the condition, the financial condition of the city will be with those 5 years, what can be done to not have a huge increase? What we can do to plan out how those increases would have to be implemented. That's what the 5-year multi-plan is. We've done this many, many times, and we've we've worked with many, many municipalities that have been in dire straits, and we have gotten them not only through the 5 years, but we've also gotten them, some of them from junk to an investment grade rating. Here, what we want to do is improve your rating, and that's the real purpose of doing a 5-year plan. It's something the rating agencies like, and it's something you all should understand and see, and we certainly want to give that to you. The last is the implementation plan. Once we look at the 5-year plan and we plan out certain strategic steps that have to be done within the 5 years, then we want to make sure it's implemented. And we want to take that implementation and plug it back into the 5 years and see how, it's almost like a scorecard. How have you done? Where are you? And where will you be in 5 years? And that's basically what our job is. And we'll go in a little more detail about that. So I'm going to turn this over to James, who's going to talk about the fiscal conditions analysis.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me okay? So I wanted to talk about the fiscal conditions analysis. As Margaret had mentioned, our engagement is going to be essentially done over 3 pieces. The fiscal conditions analysis, you can consider the past and the present. Where have we been? Where are we today? And how can we improve upon that? What we're going to do is we're going to start coming in and looking through various operating budgets, financial audit reports, any information that's going to be available to us. We want to define what the fiscal conditions are as of today. Then we're going to start an assessment of those fiscal conditions. This may include things like benchmarking, looking at your peer jurisdictions, trying to develop a baseline for our assumptions. We're going to develop a number of analytical tools. Again, things like those benchmark analyses. There's going to be a number of different analyses that we're going to be speaking to the city about as we move forward and we go through this process. And the purpose of those is going to be for us to help the city to develop some corrective action measures. Again, this evening, a lot of discussion has surrounded about structural imbalances. We want to improve upon that. We want to bring structural balances into the city's finances. We want to correct that. We want to preserve the credit rating and at a future date enhance that credit rating. Some of the items that we spoke about while we're doing this fiscal conditions analysis, we want to review environmental factors. What are the needs of the community? What resources are available to the community? We've discussed a lot this evening about economic development. We want to look at property value trends. All these different things that have a significant impact and can have a significant impact on the city. Again, the whole point of this analysis is going to be so that we can look long-term. One thing that we've seen with particularly entities that do have some level of fiscal stress, it's very easy to lose sight of the future. You're looking to put out fires on a day-to-day basis. We want to look to those future steps and to go through each of these processes to help the city get back in a structural position where they're going to be able to look in the future direction. Organizational factors. We're going to be reviewing the different policies and procedures that are currently in place, management practices, the local environment, the state, federal policy environments. One thing is, Richard had mentioned before, we do represent approximately 450 different jurisdictions across New York State, and it's very important. That helps us to have a sound and a solid understanding of the local finance laws, the general municipal laws, and a lot of the laws that govern how the city is going to be moving forward. We'll look at different financial factors, the types of revenue sources that you have available, what you're spending your funds on now, your trends in fund balance levels, debt obligations that are outstanding. All these different things are going to factor into this fiscal conditions analysis that we're going to perform. And again, the key parts that are going to be evaluating the data that's presently available to us, benchmarking it, and identifying key trends. We'll prepare this into a written analysis that we'll publicly present at the wish of Rob and the city. And it's going to have a number of both initiatives and recommended corrective actions. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Margaret, who's going to talk a little bit more about the next step, which is going to be the multi-year planning.
This is my favorite part. So in a multi-year strategic plan, what we do is we look at corrective actions that will be part of our analysis. We'll look at revenue forecast, we'll take the revenue, we won't take the budget, we're gonna look at real revenue, and we're gonna forecast that out and actually see what that looks like according to the trends that we believe are reasonable. We're gonna look at a cost forecast, just what costs are in the future, what is it that the city is up against over the next 5 years, and of course, a realistic operating budget. We believe this year's budget is pretty realistic, but we're gonna go through with it anyway. The first thing we're gonna look at is operational factors. That's something that also happens in the financial analysis. But we're gonna be interviewing just about every department in the city. And we're gonna go through that. We're gonna look at the staffing. We're gonna look at the structural deficit, as we talked about before, and the management practices. The second thing is the revenue factors. What are the key drivers? What are the recurring revenue and what are one-shots? One-shots, for those of you who don't know, is let's say there's a plan in 2 years to sell a building that the city owns, and that gets plugged into the budget. Well, it's okay, but it's not a solution, a long-term solution. And the rating agencies don't like one-shots, so we're gonna have to understand if there are any one-shots into the future. Sensitivity analysis. What that is we look at the 5 years and we look at the trends, and then we say, well, what happens if the trends don't pan out and they're lower? What is that gonna look like? What happens if they're higher? What is that gonna look like? We have to look at all aspects of what's going on in the next 5 years. Then enhancement opportunities, that's key. We're gonna drive Rob crazy and council, just like what is going to happen? What are you planning? What does it look like? What does the housing market look like? How is that going to affect the taxes? We're going to have to look at all of that, and all that will be in the plan. And service fees. We're going to look at the service fees. Are they reasonable? Are they low? Are they high? We're going to look at those. And if they're high, we're not going to trend them up because it probably be about the highest they can be over the next 5 years. So we're going to look at that. Key drivers. What are the drivers of your economy? Again, recurring one-shots, sensitivity analysis, trends, reductions, opportunities, and risk management. Those all go into this 5-year plan. The final steps are we will come up with what we believe are corrective actions. Those will be our suggestions. Realistic operating budget, a follow-through, and then sound fiscal health. What we want to see over the next, we hope, way before 5 years, hopefully within 2 years or 3 years, that we start to see financial health and that we can look at possibly improving the credit rating. We for sure want to stabilize it. So that's our goal. And if we could achieve that, we'd be what we consider pretty successful. How do we implement this? Annually, we're going to test that 5-year plan. We're going to assess the progress of the plan. We're going to look at grants. That's something, as you heard, James is an expert on. So we will be doing that. We'll look at associated offset costs associated with the plan initiative. The credit rating, develop a comprehensive rating strategy and enhance the existing credit rating. That's generally what we're going to be doing over the next year, hopefully shorter, to really get this, get the city on its financial road to success. That's what we're hoping to do. Now I'm going to turn it over to Richard, who's going to talk about the credit rating.
I apologize for the musical chairs here. But as I said initially, when I made my opening comments, two parts of our firm. The part that I'm primarily involved in is the debt side. Planning, structuring, issuing debt to fund capital projects and cash flow needs. And Marshall heads up, he's a consultant, but they always overlap. And this is how they overlap. Whenever you're in the market, when you're in the bond market, borrowing long-term debt to finance a capital project, you're required to get a credit rating. Credit rating has to take place within 30 days of the sale date of your debt. Moody's, which is the primary rating agency that rates more credits in New York and across the country than either of the two other rating agencies, Standard & Poor's and Fitch. This is how they assign credit rating. 30% of the rating is based on economic and demographic factors such as real property taxes, income levels, employment levels, who are your largest taxpayers, who are your largest employers, and what's the stability of your largest taxpayers and employers. 30% of their rating is based on your finances, the finances of the given jurisdiction, your budget to actual performance, whether you generate operating surpluses or deficits, and do you have fund balances, reserves that you can rely on if you get into a fiscal crunch. 20% of the rating is based on your outstanding debt, how quickly you repay it, the purposes for which you issue debt. Pensions is also a part of that, your OPEB liability. You know, what are you obligated to pay to your employees once they retire? And the last part of your credit rating is based on your management. Who runs the city? What's their background, their education, their experience, their tenure, etc. This is important. People talk about junk ratings. Prior to being a financial advisor, I was a banker. And when I was a banker, I was not allowed to bid on paper that was rated below the A category. So if your credit rating is below A, you lose an entire sector of the market. You might lose maybe half of the market. They'll no longer, their internal credit policies don't allow them to bid on your debt. So presently, the city is rated Baa2. So you're in the lowest investment grade rating, but you have a negative outlook. So an investor who presently buys Long Beach paper at Baa2 with a negative outlook, he has to assume, because of that negative outlook, that the paper very likely will go below the current rating while he's holding it. So while below Baa2 is only one more step, Baa3, that's still investment grade. And if you slip below Baa3, then you're junk bond status and your market access is severely limited. Yeah, this is to me probably the most interesting slide that I talk about. We subscribe to the service called Municipal Market Data. Every business day of the year, they provide interest rate scales based on credit quality and based on what occurred in the market that day. So this is the interest rate scale from May 2nd. What we're trying to show you here is the difference in cost of capital based on credit rating. So if you would issue, say, a 10-year security that was going to mature in 2029, so you look at the columns at the extreme right, if you're an A-rated credit, that 10-year security is probably going to pay a yield to an investor of about a 185. If you're AAA, there's a couple of dozen AAA jurisdictions in New York State. We represent most of them, and especially in the current market where there's not a lot of debt being sold in the market because of a change in the tax code that Mr. Trump put into place. AAA credits are outperforming this MMD scale. But again, 10-year paper AAA, they could expect to pay about 1.85% to their investors. If they dropped into the AA category, they'd pay about 197 to their investors, so 12 basis points higher. There are 100 basis points in 1 percentage point of interest. If I go further to the A category, they would drop their cost of capital would go up an additional 24 basis points. And if I go to the Baa category, where the city currently finds itself, it would be an additional 34 basis points. So again, if we look at AAA versus Baa, we see a delta of about 70 basis points. The city currently has outstanding a little over $100 million in debt. 70 basis points on $100 million in debt is over $750,000 in additional interest expense that you're incurring each year. And your debt might be outstanding 10, 15, 20 years. It adds up very quickly. So one of the goals of Margaret and James in doing what they're doing is to get you back on the sound of fiscal footing. And that ideally will result in higher credit ratings, better market access, lower cost of capital. Now you're spending your money on the needs of the city rather than on debt service, which is a very admirable goal to be achieved. I think I'm going to hand it off to James, just for the last one, in terms of what's been accomplished thus far in the last couple of weeks working with the city. Thank you.
finish off this evening, our engagement has commenced with the city. So we have highlighted here a couple things that we've started as kind of our initial starting points. The first one is during the fiscal conditions analysis, we're going to be looking at attrition levels, the current staffing levels. We'll do a hiring analysis just to see if employees are adequate and if they're matched to the proper positions. We've commenced some work looking at a beach pass benchmark study. We've looked at some of your peer jurisdictions. What types of fees are they charging for the permits on their beaches? We're comparing them against the city's fees, trying to determine if the fees are adequate, if they should perhaps be increased, if there's other fees that could be realized by the city. We've started looking and developing some short-term credit rating tools. We've started to look at a couple different vehicles in the city's fleet and how those vehicles are being procured. As our engagement progresses forward, this is probably an area that we'll expand out on. We might look at the procurement method for other vehicles that are within the city's fleet. And grant procurement, you're going to probably hear this in every step that, as along the process. As we're making recommendations, we want to mitigate the costs to the extent possible to the city. We're going to be looking for ways to fund these different initiatives to make, to make it more effective for the city. As we move forward during our multi-year planning phase, we're going to be completing a comprehensive 5-year plan that can be adjusted. We want to be able to take these initiatives that we're looking at and that we're planning and implement them into that plan and see what the net effect's going to be on the city years forward. The operation budget is what Rob had talked a lot about tonight. The goal of what our job is going to be is to move that operating budget forward and to move it into a 5-year plus time frame. We may look at different policies that are currently in place. We may make recommendations to develop some policies. Again, that's a key driver as we start to review the credit rating and some of the credit rating factors. Fiscal policies go a very long way, so we may make some recommendations regarding that. Certainly as the engagement progresses, there's going to be additional objectives that are identified. If we come up with additional ideas, we'll bring them up to the city. If the city has other areas that they like us to review and to look into, we certainly want to be made aware of that. I think with that.
How are you? Nice to meet you. I'm sorry for having to jump over you.
Even just for a day.
Thank you. Introduce yourself. Your first name? Rob. My father's name. I'm Don, like the president. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for staying awake and very important information. I'd like to thank Rob, our acting city manager, for his presentation and all the staff that helped put the presentation together. And of course, I'd like to thank CMA for what hopefully is the beginning of a new path. So I thank you. And if we have questions for you, we will forward this to you. With that, I would ask if any of the council members have any questions. But first, I would just like to say that, This is the proposed budget by the acting city manager. The council will listen to the residents, review the residents' concerns, and then it's up to the council to either knock that down, pass it, or increase it, I suppose. But this is just a proposal at this time from the acting city manager in conjunction with the comptroller's office. So I guess I'll just open it up to the floor right now for the council before we go to public comment. Okay, so I think we're all in the same agreement that we're here to listen. We are often reminded that we're here to represent the concerns of our constituents. So when you come up, I would ask, I think we can state up front that everyone is going to be against almost everyone will be against a tax increase at all, whether it's 1, 2, or 8%. So I would ask you to be specific. If there's something that you think or something that you've identified that you think is a place where revenue can be generated, or if you think there's something that can be cut, maybe there's a program in the city that isn't important to you, and there may be people that think similar. So it's revenue and expenses, that's it. So with that, I guess I would like to just start with Long Beach residents, since they are the taxpayers here. But I'll start on this side, and I see Ms. Hession already has her hand up. So please give your name and address.
Eileen Hession, Long Beach. First of all, the first line of the agenda says that this meeting was for the purpose of giving citizens an adequate opportunity to present their views on the summary of the budget. They spent more time talking about ACM than you did on your slideshow. That is a disgrace. If you wanted us to hear what they had to say, it should have been before you hired them. You also started your talk, Mr. Agostisi, by saying when you took office a short time ago. How many years have you been working with the city?
He was referring to as acting city manager.
Yes, I understand that, but he's been here in a very important position for many years, 10, I think. Is that right?
No, more.
More? Can you answer the question then?
Yeah, sure, 12 and a half.
12 and a half, okay. You talk about building a foundation. After 12 and a half years, you should be on the 4th floor by now, not the foundation. We're starting at the beginning, and that is ridiculous. You let Jack Schneerman borrow and borrow and borrow, and nobody said a word about him, about stopping him. Financial credibility could have been enhanced if you had hired a comptroller, a full-time person. That's money. That's about finances. You bragged about getting your financial something or other in on time, as though that's a big deal. Getting things in on time is what we're so proud of. You've missed dates for grants in the past too. I mean, it's ridiculous. All the audits you talked about, that should be an embarrassment. You're talking about all the things that you've done, you're tightening your belt. I see on the new hires, Mike Robinson, who I like, Mike's a very nice guy, but he's been hired for 2 more positions. How many is that now? His name is up there twice. And then you also talk about money that you can't do anything about because it's union. Well, maybe get somebody who can negotiate. Do something about their health costs. Do something about all these raises. Do something about your 6-figure hires that you've had since we've been in this position. Take some cars away from the people who are taking them home at night and using them as their personal automobiles. There's a lot of things that you can be done. Now you're talking about starting groups of people, talking about ethics and everything else. We've been asking for that for years, years. Your hands are not tied. If you had the nerve, you would be a stronger negotiator. I'd like to know how many days and how many hours the city council all met together to talk about this budget. I bet it's a very small number. I have a lot more to say.
Thank you, Ms. Hession. Anyone on this side here? Yes, Ms. McGinnis? Name and address, please.
McGinnis, Long Beach. First, I want to comment on the presentations. I want to remind everyone that the city manager does and always has reported to the city council. This cycle of ballooning taxes every 6 to 7 years is directly tied to our elected officials kicking the can, and it must be broken by people who put people before politics. In my own experience, audits are not painful if you have experienced professional staff on board and sound policies and procedures. Finally, my candid assessment for the residents I talk with is that we do not have confidence in this administration, which seems to have awoken from their year-and-a-half slumber to finally put the city on course. It's just too little, too late. On to the budget. Has the acting city manager given the city council members a list of discretionary expenses that can be cut or reduced to lower proposed tax increase, and if not, why? For the general fund account called termination salaries, there's $1.6 million budgeted. In light of the unexpected need to do additional bonding late in the current fiscal year, have the council members been given the salary schedule that makes up this number for the next budget so they can confirm it's reasonable or decide it should be adjusted up or down? Because Long Beach has been authorized to use debt obligations to fund our operating budget, the city has to submit the proposed budget to the New York State Comptroller's Office so they can provide an independent evaluation of the reasonableness of the revenue and expenditure estimates in the proposed budget, and analyze the composition of revenues and expenses in order to determine if the budget is structurally balanced. Has this been done? When do you expect to receive their comments, or have you already received them? And have the comments and recommendations by the New York State Comptroller's Office for this new budget been shared with each city council member? In order to do the analysis, the New York State Comptroller's Office requires additional information. A projected general fund balance as of June 19, along with projected significant positive and negative variances, explanations for large variances between budget and actual for the completed fiscal year, pertinent information concerning salaries and salary increases, debt payment schedule. Has that information been submitted? Has the information been shared with each city council member in order to help them analyze this budget? It's also required that the council shall review each recommendation from the Comptroller's Office and make adjustments to its proposed budget consistent with any recommendations made by the New York State Comptroller. In addition, any recommendations that the council rejects are required to be explained in writing to the New York State Comptroller. Will all the city council members get the opportunity to decide which recommendations by the Comptroller's Office are accepted or rejected?
Thank you, Ms. McGinnis. Acting City Manager, can you speak to the comptroller? I know we didn't submit it. This budget, in terms of this budget.
Right, the review is underway.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
The controller review of this budget is underway. I just met with the office yesterday.
Okay.
And all the information that you were required to submit to the
Thank you,
Comptroller's
Ms.
Office,
McGinnis.
has that been given to the city council members so they can analyze the budget themselves?
We don't have a copy of the budget.
Right.
No, the supplemental materials that were sent to the Comptroller's Office so that you could actually analyze the budget. Have each city council member been given all those supplemental materials?
I can't say offhand.
Thank you, Ms. McGinnis. Thank you.
I also asked
Thank you.
I asked if the Comptroller's Office if the city council members will be able to.
There's a lot of people that want to speak.
I asked questions.
Wait 3 minutes or?
Answer questions! The purpose of this hearing is to render views, present views, not to ask questions.
My view is that my elected officials need to review this budget. In order to do that, they need information.
Right, so.
Have they gotten that information?
Touched on a couple of items, right? You said staffing and competence, right? Can you expound on that?
It's in the New York State Comptroller's letter that the city council and the city manager received. Have they gotten that information? These people are elected so that I don't have to read the budget. But if they don't get the information, then how are they supposed to vote on the budget?
You're asking for the information you asked during the welfare commission.
This is pertinent for elected officials to make rational budget decisions. You cannot vote on a budget in a vacuum.
Thank you, Ashley. Now, please. We always are very.
Who told me to sit down?
Excuse me, well, 3 minutes
Who
is
told me
up,
to
so I
sit
guess
down?
for us to say that we can, and will absolutely respond to all council requests in a very timely fashion, for anything they want. Especially in the case of the budget, this is their principal responsibility, so you and I are in agreement.
Thank you. Next speaker on this side here. Anyone over here on this side? Anybody here? No? Ms. Trustin, I see you in the back there. Please state your name and address for the record.
Elizabeth Preston, Long Beach. Has the full council met to discuss this budget? Has the full council met to discuss this budget?
Yes or no?
No, we haven't met all together. We've met individually.
If no,
The comptroller.
well, wait, if, like, you know, you can't see me because I know you're working on that ADA stuff. If no, why not?
Well, you know, in the council's defense, there was a question about the open meetings law recently that was resolved. I believe that the resolution will facilitate a meeting for the council when they so desire.
So will it be an open meeting?
That's not for me, whether it's gonna be a work session or not, is not for me to determine, Mr. Trustin. So I can't answer that question.
Mr. Arama? Will it be an open meeting?
That would be a discussion for the council to have and decide collectively.
Well, if it is an open meeting, I hope that you will extend this invitation to the residents of the city of Long Beach. Thank you.
Liz, tell me your mind. Yeah, okay, tell them again, remind them.
Someone else on this side here? Anyone? No? Okay. I see a hand in the back. Mr. Paganini?
Bob Paganini, Long Beach.
Thank you.
This is a simple summary that I made up. Very quick and simple. What's going on and what happened. Here it goes. Since 2012, this ever-evolving administration, till now, with this new tax increase of 7.9, raised taxes, water, sewer, and beach fees, plus the superblock tax to the tune of 35%, and that's low. 35% tax increase, with no real remedy for the near future. I don't think a lot of people of Long Beach can bear the burden anymore, especially with the new real estate assessments. Good people of Long Beach will be forced out of Long Beach because they were betrayed and forgotten by a few of the 5 elected officials. Can we, the people, do anything to stop the tax increase? I doubt it. But one thing we can do is remember what has happened here in the last few years and be very, very careful who we vote for in the very, very near future. Thank you.
I'm shocked at political speech. Yes. is actually a budget hearing. Can you just give us your name and address, please?
Thank you, Eddie Brona. Over at the April vacation, I spent more than 8 hours reviewing the Long Beach proposed budget. And on April 24th, which was 13 days ago, I emailed the entire city council and acting city manager, AgCC, a list of budget questions. I asked them specifically to answer my budget questions before this meeting so I could propose budget solutions. But, of course, Mr. Agassiz has not answered any of my questions. So tonight, I will stand up here, not proposing solutions, but reading off the same budget questions I gave you 2 weeks ago. We are in an urgent fiscal crisis. Every dollar must be accounted for. And I want to fix the budget. I want to give you specifics, but please answer my questions first so I can help formulate some proposals. First, with clerk fees, in 2018, we received $97,000 worth of clerk fees. In our proposed budget, we're expecting to receive $160,000. Where are we getting the $60,000 from? Are we going to raise clerk fees, or are we expecting them to just come? Civil service charges, fiscal year 2018 actual, $88,000. Fiscal year 2020 proposed, $159,000. Are there planned civil service exams? If so, have we budgeted for those positions? Police fees, 2018 actual, $110,000. Fiscal year 2020 proposed, $250,000. How does the city plan to increase police fees by $140,000? Ambulance charges, fiscal year 2018 actual, $1.089 million. 2020 proposed, $1.12 million. Why is the city only expecting a $35,000 increase in ambulance fees? The city significantly raised ambulance fees back in September. Is this raise accounted for? Recreation camp fees, $234,000, 2018 actual. 2020 proposed, $350,000. Why does the city expect a $100,000 increase in camp fees? Court fees, fiscal year 2018 actual, $368,000. Fiscal year 2020 proposed, $485,000. To increase court fees, does the city plan to issue more tickets, increase fines, or do something else? Does this line item include building inspection and code enforcement fines? If so, how much does the city collect in code enforcement / building inspection fines? Parking violations, fiscal year 2018 actual, $400,000. Fiscal year 2020 proposed, $525,000. To increase parking fees, does the city plan to issue more tickets, increase fines, or something else? Some of my spending questions are internal controls for reducing overtime. There are several budget reductions in overtime across many departments. What internal controls are in place to ensure that overtime is accurate?
I think, Christie, you have these questions printed out in front of you, right? So we'll run through them. Yeah, so your time is up.
Sorry, Mr. President, I would just say, Mr. Berlin, understand something about your questions. They're no more or less important than every other president's questions that we receive. So they are handled in order, but understand something, that our accounting consultant, Ms. Hanson Hightower, was busy helping prepare presentations. So the fact that you simply wanted your questions answered ahead of this meeting doesn't dictate my policy, okay? We have gone out of our way to get the answers to most or all of your questions. But understand something, there's no reason to come up here and be rude or demeaning to anyone. So please bear that in mind for future comments. Thank you. I'm not interested. I just want to hear Ms. Hightower answer your questions now. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the clerk fees are going from about $100,000 trend-wise to $160,000 is directly related to the foreclosure registry that you asked about later on. Civil service charges are related to planned civil service exams, however, it's just exams, there are no plans to create new positions related to these exams. Police fees, we are adding plate reader revenue, I believe Rob mentioned that, Mr. Taggy will come up to speak about that a little bit later. As far as ambulance charges go, we did increase rates back in September. However, for the past few years, we have not met our revenue projections. Therefore, we did not include an increase until we know what we're going recreation camp fees. There was a local camp that is closing, is not going to be in existence for the summer. And there is a plan with the recreation and that camp to funnel all of those camp members to Long Beach camp this year. In addition, they will pay more than regular residents, and we are also raising regular camp fees as well. So that's our camp fees are going up this year. The court fees and parking violations are the same, two sides of the same coin. Rob had mentioned earlier that the city has already increased the fee by now, which is a large portion of the revenue. So that should be the conservative projection that we increase revenue based on it.
you.